I don't know where to start, honestly. My name's Emily, and I never thought I'd be writing something like this. The relationship I had with my husband, Ben, was supposed to be perfect, right? I mean, we met when I was in my early 20s, everything seemed right at first, he was charming, funny, and treated me well. Or so I thought. The first few months were like a dream. He made me feel special, like I was the only one that mattered. But slowly, over time, little things started to shift. He'd get irritated if I didn't agree with him on something, or if I made plans without asking him first. I brushed it off, told myself it was nothing serious. But then, the first slap came. It was one of those days where we were both stressed out. We'd been fighting for a couple of days about some stupid thing, I don't even remember what anymore. I just remember he was yelling at me, and I yelled back. It didn't take much to set him off, and I didn't even see it coming. 1 second, I was trying to explain myself, and the next, he slapped me across the face. Hard. I froze. My brain couldn't even process it. I was too stunned to cry at first. Too stunned to move. But then, after a few minutes, I ran to the bathroom and locked the door. I stood there, staring at my reflection, not recognizing the person looking back at me. That was the first time I asked myself what the hell was going on. And, of course, after that, he apologized. He cried, promised he'd never do it again, and I, being the fool that I am, believed him. But it didn't stop. It just got worse over time. Each time, there was a new excuse. I wasn't doing enough. I was too sensitive. I was being a bitch. And the worst part? I didn't feel like I could leave. Where would I go? What would I do? And deep down, I thought, maybe I deserved it. I wish I could say I left after that first time, but it didn't happen. And then came the day I had to turn to my brother, Ryan. Ryan is my older brother, and I've always looked up to him, even though he's a bit of an asshole sometimes. I always assumed he'd have my back no matter what. But when I finally told him what Ben had been doing to me, I couldn't have predicted his reaction. It all started one night when I was over at my parents' house for dinner. I was trying to act normal, but I couldn't hide the bruise on my arm. Ben had gotten mad about something stupid again, and this time, it was my fault for not having dinner ready exactly when he wanted it. The argument escalated, like they always did, and he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave a mark. I had been trying to cover it with long sleeves, but that night, my mom noticed, and she asked about it. I couldn't lie to her. I didn't know how much longer I could keep up the act. So, I broke down and told her everything. Ben had been getting physical, and I didn't know what to do. My mom was horrified, but when she asked if I had talked to Ryan about it, I froze. I hadn't. I didn't know how to. I wasn't sure how he'd react. But my mom insisted, so I called him that night. Ryan didn't even give me a chance to explain before he started going off. What the hell is wrong with you, Em? Are you seriously telling me you've been letting him beat you? Are you some kind of idiot? I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to cry, but I held it in. He wasn't even letting me talk. I tried to explain how I was scared, how it wasn't that simple, but Ryan wasn't having it. Listen to yourself, Em. This shit happens in every relationship. All marriages have problems. You think you're the only one who's been through this? I don't know what you expect me to do. You're making it worse for yourself by not dealing with it. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I never imagined Ryan would say something like that. He made it sound like it was normal. Like I was the crazy one for thinking there was something wrong with getting hit. He kept going on about how I needed to toughen up and stop being a bitch about it. His words stung more than anything Ben had ever said to me. I couldn't believe my own brother was telling me to just deal with it. I didn't know what to do. I was completely shaken. I thought I could count on Ryan, but instead, I felt completely alone. The next time I saw Ryan, I was a mess. I don't think I could have hidden it if I tried. I'd barely slept the night before, and the weight of his words still felt like a heavy stone in my chest. I wasn't sure if I was angry at Ben, at myself, or at Ryan for making me feel like I was the one in the wrong. We met up at a coffee shop, just the two of us. I'd been avoiding him for days, but I knew I couldn't keep doing that. So, I sat down across from him, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk," I said, already knowing how this was going to go. Ryan took a sip of his coffee, his usual cocky smirk on his face. "About what? You're not gonna come at me with some bullshit again, are you?" he asked, looking like he was already over it. Like I was wasting his time. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Ryan," I said, staring him down. "What you said to me. About Ben. About how this is normal and everyone goes through it." His expression shifted just slightly, but I could tell he was getting defensive already. "I don't know what you expect from me, Em. I've been through stuff in my own relationships. Shit gets heated sometimes, okay? People argue. People make mistakes." "Make mistakes?" My voice was shaking now. I couldn't hold back the anger. "You're saying this is a mistake?" "He hits me, Ryan. It's not a mistake. He's fucking beating me, and you're telling me it's just normal? You're just as bad as he is, acting like this is something I should just accept." Ryan's face turned red. "You have no fucking clue, Em. You're acting like you're the only one who's had it tough. I've been through my own shit, okay? You think every guy who gets into an argument doesn't blow off steam sometimes? Maybe you're the problem, huh? Maybe you're just not doing enough to make him happy." I felt like I had been slapped again, but this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. "That's bullshit, Ryan. You don't get to tell me it's my fault. You don't get to blame me for his violence. And you don't get to act like I'm some weak, whiny little bitch who can't handle a relationship." Ryan slammed his fist on the table, and I flinched. "You're making this so much worse than it has to be," he snapped. "You're acting like you're some victim, but I'm telling you, you're not. No one's perfect, Em. You need to suck it up. Maybe you need to take a good hard look at yourself and stop blaming Ben for everything." I was numb. His words were like daggers, and the more he yelled, the more I felt like I was suffocating. I stood up, shaking my head. "I'm done, Ryan. I don't need your approval. I don't need your fucking excuses for Ben or anyone else. I don't need you." I walked out, leaving him sitting there, fuming. The moment I stepped outside, I let the tears fall. But they weren't just for what Ben had done to me. They were for everything: how my brother had failed me, how I felt trapped, how I thought I had no one to turn to anymore. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I'd spent the night in my car crying after the confrontation with Ryan, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. I always thought that if things went wrong, I could count on my brother. That he'd be there, backing me up. But no, instead, he'd made me feel like I was overreacting. Like I was the one who'd messed up. I barely spoke to anyone for a while. I didn't want to go home to Ben, but I also didn't know where else to go. I didn't want to go back to my parents' house after what had happened there. The guilt I felt for not just accepting Ryan's advice was eating me alive. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was making a bigger deal out of this than I should. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I knew it wasn't normal to be afraid of your own husband. It wasn't normal to walk on eggshells every damn day, hoping not to set him off. Yet, the guilt gnawed at me like a constant companion. I kept replaying everything in my mind: Ryan's anger, the slap, the way Ben would apologize every single time, like he had some magical power to erase the past with a few tears. And then the cycle would repeat. I couldn't ignore the physical pain, either. The bruises were starting to fade, but the emotional damage was still there. I found myself constantly second-guessing my worth, wondering if I really was the problem. Was I too sensitive? Was I not doing enough for Ben? Maybe I just needed to shut up and be the perfect wife. Then, one morning, I woke up and realized something. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep living in this cycle of self-doubt and fear. I had to make a choice. Either I stayed, like Ryan suggested, and accepted that my life was never going to change, or I took control back for myself. I remember standing in the bathroom, staring at my reflection, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't recognize myself. I wasn't the woman I used to be. I wasn't the woman who deserved to be treated like this. But somehow, I still didn't feel strong enough to walk away. Ben had a way of convincing me it wasn't that bad. He had a way of making me feel like I was the crazy one, like I was just making everything up. That day, I picked up my phone and called a friend. The first person I'd talked to since Ryan had turned his back on me. I needed someone who would just listen, who wouldn't judge me. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a little lighter. That conversation, even though it was brief, gave me something I hadn't had in a long time: hope. Maybe I wasn't alone in this after all. That phone call with my friend, Jessica, was a turning point. She didn't hesitate for a second when I told her what had been happening. She didn't try to tell me it was normal or that I should just toughen up. She just listened. And then she told me something I'll never forget: "Emily, you don't have to live like this. You're not trapped, okay? You deserve better. No one should make you feel like you're worthless." For the first time in ages, I felt like someone was seeing me for who I was, not a wife trying to make things work, but a person who deserved respect. Jess said I should take a break, get out of the house, and figure things out. No more justifying Ben's behavior. No more pretending like everything was fine. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but hearing her say those words gave me a spark of strength. Maybe I wasn't as weak as I thought. The next morning, I woke up and knew what I had to do. I had to leave. I couldn't keep putting myself through this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine just because Ben said it was. I'd been convincing myself that I was the problem for so long, but now, I could see it clearly: it wasn't me. It was him. But the reality hit hard when I started packing my things. I thought about all the reasons I had stayed: the fear of what people would think, the embarrassment of leaving my marriage, the pressure to keep up the perfect image of a happy couple. But I couldn't let that control me anymore. I couldn't keep living in a house that felt like a prison. When I told Ben I was leaving, he didn't react the way I expected. I thought he'd beg me to stay, that maybe he'd apologize again and promise he'd change. But no, he didn't. Instead, he got angry. Really angry. "Are you serious?" he snapped. "You're just gonna leave me like this? After everything I've done for you?" He tried to grab my arm, like he always did when he thought I was overreacting. But this time, I pulled away, standing tall. "I'm not your punching bag anymore, Ben. I'm done." His face twisted with rage. "You think you're better than me? You think you can just walk out of here like you're the victim? You're a fucking bitch." It hurt, but I was done. The words no longer had the power to break me. Not this time. I left. And when I did, something inside me shifted. It was terrifying. I didn't know what the future would hold or where I'd go from here, but for the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the fear. Free from the guilt. Free from Ben. I went to Jessica's, and she didn't hesitate to let me stay. I spent the next few weeks just figuring things out, leaning on my friends, and realizing that I was worth more than the abuse I'd endured. I took a break from everything: no contact with Ben, no explanations. I needed space to breathe and figure out who I was without him in my life. But the hardest part? The hardest part was coming to terms with what had happened. I kept asking myself why I didn't leave sooner, why I let myself get to that point. But I couldn't stay in the past. I had to focus on the future, on the person I wanted to be, and the life I deserved. I wasn't going to be his victim anymore. And in that silence, I realized something: leaving wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. It's been a few months since I left Ben. I still can't believe how much my life has changed. I spent the first few weeks feeling like I was floating, no real direction, just trying to make sense of everything. But slowly, things started to come together. The weight I had been carrying around for years began to lift. And in its place, I started to find myself again. Looking back, I realize how easy it was to let myself stay in that toxic relationship. I convinced myself that the good moments, his apologies, the gifts, the way he'd act like the perfect husband after each outburst, were enough to outweigh the bad. I let myself believe that his love was all I needed to survive. But now, I can see how dangerous that thinking was. I wasn't living for me. I was living to make him happy, to avoid his anger, to be the wife he wanted. And in doing so, I lost myself. I forgot who I was and what I deserved. I've learned that it's not enough to just survive. I deserve to thrive. I deserve a life where I'm treated with kindness and respect. Where I don't have to constantly fear being hurt or yelled at. Where I don't have to explain myself, over and over again, just to make someone else feel better. And I've learned that walking away isn't a failure. It's the first step in reclaiming my power. As for Ryan, well, I don't think I'll ever look at him the same way again. I still don't understand why he couldn't see it, why he tried to make me feel like I was the one at fault. But I'm done trying to change people. I can't force anyone to see the truth if they don't want to. What matters is that I saw it. I saw that I wasn't the problem. And I saw that I had the strength to walk away. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this: don't let anyone tell you that abuse is normal. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to tolerate it, because you don't. You don't deserve to live in fear, to feel like you're walking on eggshells every day. If you're in a situation like this, I urge you to get out, as hard as it may seem. You are not alone, and you are so much stronger than you think. As for me, I'm working on rebuilding my life. It's not perfect, but it's mine. And I'm going to make it the best it can be. The scars are still there, but I'm learning to wear them as reminders of how far I've come. I'm no longer a victim. I'm a survivor. And that's a title I'll wear proudly. It's been a while since I wrote that post, and I still think about everything that happened. I've gotten messages from people who've been through similar situations, and I've had some conversations that have opened my eyes even more. It's crazy how many people are suffering in silence, just like I was. The difference now is that I'm no longer afraid to talk about it. I'm not ashamed of what happened anymore. I've taken steps to rebuild, not just physically but emotionally too. I started seeing a therapist, someone I could trust to help me unpack everything that had gone down. I'd always thought therapy was for people who were really broken, but now I see it differently. It's not about being broken. It's about understanding your worth and learning to protect yourself. I've learned so much about setting boundaries, about learning to say no, and about how to not let my past define me. In a weird way, I'm grateful for this experience. Not for the pain or the humiliation, obviously, but for what it's taught me. I've discovered a version of myself that I didn't know existed. I'm not the timid, apologetic woman who tried to make everyone else happy at the expense of my own well-being. I'm someone who values herself, someone who won't put up with toxic bullshit. I've also learned the importance of surrounding myself with the right people. My friends, Jess in particular, have been amazing. They've been there for me in ways I didn't know I needed, offering support and reminding me of the things I used to take for granted about myself. I don't think I would have had the courage to leave if I hadn't had a support system behind me. I won't lie, though, it hasn't been easy. There are days when I still feel the sting of everything that happened. There are moments when I question whether I made the right choice. Could I have fixed things with Ben? Could I have made the marriage work if I had just tried harder, been better? But those thoughts are fewer and farther between now. I'm learning to accept that some relationships aren't meant to be saved, and that doesn't mean I failed. It just means I'm meant for something better. And as for Ben? He tried reaching out once or twice after I left. He apologized, said he was going to get help. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me thought maybe, just maybe, he really had changed. But then I remembered the cycle. I remembered the fear. And I remembered how I felt when I was with him, small, invisible, worthless. That wasn't love. And it never would be. I'm not sure what the future holds yet. I'm still figuring out what I want from life, what kind of person I want to be. But I do know this, I'm not going to settle for less than I deserve. I've learned that much. And if you're in a situation like mine, I hope you take that lesson to heart too. Leaving wasn't easy. But staying would have been worse. It's scary to walk away from the familiar, to step into the unknown, but sometimes, that's the only way to find yourself again. And if anyone reading this feels trapped or like they have nowhere to turn, I want to say this: you are worth so much more than you think. You don't have to stay in a situation that hurts you. There is help, there is hope, and most importantly, there is you. And you deserve to be free. It's crazy how much changes when you finally take control of your life. I didn't realize just how much I'd been holding on to, even after leaving Ben. The emotional baggage, the doubts, the constant second-guessing, it all lingered like a cloud hanging over me. But as time has passed, I've learned that letting go isn't just about walking away from someone or something toxic. It's about freeing yourself from the past, from the self-imposed guilt, and from the notion that you have to carry someone else's burdens. The first few weeks were the hardest. There was so much emptiness, so much room in my life where Ben's anger and manipulation used to be. It was weird, honestly. It felt like there was this giant hole in my heart that I didn't know how to fill. I'd spent years putting myself last, constantly trying to make everything okay for Ben, for the people around me. Now, for the first time in my life, I had no one to care for but me. And it felt foreign. But, as much as I didn't want to admit it, I needed this space. I needed to figure out who I was without all the noise. I needed to find out what made me happy, what made me feel alive. And, in a way, I think this is where I finally started healing. I started doing things I hadn't done in forever, things I'd put on the back burner because Ben never liked them or because I didn't have the energy after dealing with his mood swings. I signed up for a yoga class. I spent entire afternoons reading books that had been collecting dust on my shelf. I went hiking. Hell, I even tried painting. And for the first time in so long, I felt like I was living for myself. It wasn't perfect. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I had made the right choice. There were moments when I wanted to crawl back to Ben, to apologize, to beg for him to change. But I didn't. And that was progress. Each day, each decision not to go back, was a victory. I've been doing a lot of thinking about relationships in general. Not just the one with Ben, but my relationships with others, my friends, my family, even my brother. I used to believe that love meant enduring. That love meant putting up with pain and mistreatment because the other person needed you. But that's not love. Not the kind of love I want in my life. Love is supposed to be about respect, kindness, and support, not fear. Ryan, my brother, has been trying to reach out more lately. At first, I didn't want to hear it. I was still mad, still hurt by how he dismissed my feelings, how he minimized everything I'd gone through. But over time, I've realized that holding on to that anger doesn't help me. It only keeps me tied to the past, to things I can't change. So, I've started talking to him again, slowly, cautiously. I'm not sure if I'll ever fully trust him the way I once did, but I'm learning to let go of the bitterness. It's not about forgiving him for his ignorance, but about freeing myself from the weight of the resentment. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I'm not going to let anyone dictate my worth again. Not Ben, not Ryan, not anyone. I'm in charge of my own story now. And if I can offer one piece of advice to anyone reading this who might be stuck in a similar situation, it's this: you don't have to keep carrying the weight of someone else's mistakes. Let go. Heal. And step into a life where you can be your true, unbroken self. Because you deserve that. It's funny how the world seems to shift when you stop fighting for something that isn't worth it. When I left Ben, I thought my life was just going to be one big mess of healing and soul-searching. I assumed I'd be dealing with heartbreak, loneliness, and regrets forever. But somehow, things have been moving in a different direction than I expected. I spent a lot of time focusing on myself in those first few months. Therapy helped, yes, but it was the little things that really made the difference. I learned to enjoy the silence in my house. I rediscovered my love for cooking, a passion I had shoved aside when I was trying to keep the peace at home. I'd never been the type of person to eat out much, but I began to savor the quiet meals I made for myself. There was something empowering about it, the simple act of nourishing myself, not just physically, but emotionally. A few months after I left, I started meeting new people. Not in any romantic sense, just new friends who felt like a breath of fresh air. I joined a local book club, started going to trivia nights with people from work. It felt like I was living again, like the fog had cleared enough for me to see the world through fresh eyes. I was no longer weighed down by Ben's negativity, no longer holding my breath waiting for the next outburst. And, as unexpected as it sounds, I started to date. I wasn't looking for love, honestly, I wasn't even sure if I was ready for it. But I was open to the idea of companionship. I met someone named Jack at one of those trivia nights. He was kind, funny, and, most importantly, he listened. There was no pressure, no manipulation. Just two people getting to know each other, and, for once, I wasn't afraid of what that might lead to. Jack wasn't perfect, but he didn't need to be. He respected my boundaries, never pushed me to rush things, and, above all, he made me feel safe. That's something I never knew I needed until I had it. The more time I spent with Jack, the more I realized just how much I had been missing. Not necessarily in terms of romance, but in terms of what a healthy relationship feels like. No screaming matches, no silent treatment, no belittling. Just simple, honest conversations. I'm not saying that I've fully moved on from everything, because I don't think I ever will. Ben still crosses my mind sometimes, and when I do think about him, it's not with anger anymore. It's with a sense of pity. Pity that he never learned how to love the right way. Pity that he chose to abuse someone who only ever wanted the best for him. But the difference now is that I don't let his mistakes define me. I'm not carrying his shame or his anger with me anymore. I'm living my life, my way. And as for my brother, Ryan, our relationship has slowly started to shift. He hasn't been perfect, he still gets defensive when I talk about Ben, but he's trying. He's learning. And I think that's all I can ask for. We're not close the way we once were, but we're getting there. And for the first time in a long while, I'm okay with that. I've realized that my healing doesn't depend on anyone else's approval or understanding. It's mine to own. Looking back, I can see how far I've come. I still have bad days. I still get triggered by certain things, certain words, certain situations. But I don't let them break me anymore. I've learned that healing is messy and it takes time, but it's worth it. I've learned to trust myself again, and that's the greatest gift I could ever give myself. If you're in a relationship that makes you feel small, if you're stuck in a cycle of abuse or manipulation, please know that you don't have to stay. There is life after the pain, after the fear. There's peace on the other side of leaving. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. And remember, you are worthy of love. True love. The kind that lifts you up, not drags you down. You deserve happiness. You deserve safety. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be free. Sometimes, the hardest part about moving on isn't about leaving a toxic relationship, it's about rebuilding yourself from the ground up. After Ben, I didn't just need to find my way back to who I was, I had to figure out who I wanted to be moving forward. And that? That was harder than I ever expected. There are days when it feels like I've done everything right, I've made positive changes, I've learned from my mistakes, and I've built a life that feels truly mine. But then there are days when I'm hit with the realization that, despite everything I've been through, I still have work to do. I think the hardest part about healing is the self-doubt that creeps in when you're alone, when your mind starts wandering. I'll be sitting there, sipping my coffee, and suddenly I'll remember something Ben said or did that made me feel worthless. And for a split second, I'll wonder, was I really that bad? Was I really the cause of all the problems in the marriage? But then I remind myself, no, I wasn't. No, I'm not. I used to believe that I had to apologize for existing in Ben's space, that his anger was something I had to somehow fix. I used to think that his temper was a reflection of my shortcomings. But no more. I've realized that the only thing I was guilty of was loving someone who didn't know how to love back. And that's a huge shift in perspective. I've gotten a lot of support through this journey, more than I ever expected. There were times when I felt like I was on the edge, ready to lose everything I had gained, but my friends and therapy kept me grounded. Jess has been incredible, she's been the one to remind me on those bad days that I am worthy of a life without fear. She's the one who listens to me vent about stupid things that don't matter, the little irritations that pile up in my new, free life. And I'm thankful for that. But there's still the nagging feeling of wanting Ben to understand, to get it. I want him to see the woman he broke, to understand that the rage and the manipulation were never okay. I want him to take responsibility for the damage he caused. But then I realize, he's never going to get it. He's never going to change. And I have to stop waiting for an apology that's never coming. I've spent too much time waiting for closure from other people, waiting for Ryan to get it, waiting for Ben to apologize, waiting for validation from people who'll never see me for who I truly am. It's a harsh truth to face, but I've come to understand that closure is something I have to give myself. I can't rely on anyone else to give me peace. I have to create that peace in my own life, on my own terms. And I'm learning how to do that. That's the thing with healing. It's not about fixing all the broken parts of you, it's about accepting those parts and learning how to carry them. It's about finding strength in the things that hurt, and realizing that they don't define you. They don't control you. You do. I think one of the most empowering things I've done since I left Ben is to let myself be vulnerable. For so long, I built walls around myself. I thought I had to be strong, to prove I could survive without anyone's help. But now, I'm learning that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to need people. It's okay to admit that you're not invincible, that you don't have to be perfect. And for anyone out there who feels like they're too broken to be fixed, let me tell you this, you're not broken. You're just growing. And growth isn't a straight line. It's messy, it's painful, and sometimes it feels like you're taking 2 steps back for every step forward. But that's okay. It's part of the process. If you're still in a bad situation, if you're still holding on to the hope that things will get better, I'm telling you, there's a life on the other side of this. It won't happen overnight, and it won't always be easy, but it's possible. I'm living proof. You can find your way back to yourself, even after the worst kind of betrayal. You are worth so much more than the pain you've been through. Don't let anyone, especially yourself, tell you otherwise. And don't stop moving forward. Because, in the end, the only person you really need to make happy is you. I think one of the hardest lessons I've learned in this journey is that sometimes, we have to confront things we'd rather not face. I was so busy running away from my past, from Ben, from the pain he caused, that I never really took the time to look at the full picture of what had happened. I was so focused on surviving, on getting out, that I didn't give myself the chance to process everything. And that's something I really regret. Because, in order to move forward, in order to heal, we have to face the things that hurt us. I had to look at my relationship with Ben, not just as an escape, but as a lesson. I had to let myself feel the anger, the betrayal, the shame. I had to let those emotions out, even if it meant breaking down in the middle of the night when no one was watching. I had to grieve the loss of the person I thought I married, the person I thought he was. I think the hardest part of all of this was realizing how much I had ignored or excused. I'd convinced myself that Ben's behavior was my fault, that if I tried harder, if I was more patient, things would get better. But it wasn't me. It wasn't my fault. I had to admit that I had been gaslit for so long that I couldn't see the truth. It's crazy to think that, at one point, I thought I had to apologize for his anger, for his cruelty. I would spend hours trying to figure out what I had done wrong, what I could change to make things better. But nothing worked. Nothing ever did. Because Ben's problems were never about me, they were about him. That realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and I remember just sitting in my living room, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of it. But then, in a weird way, it also freed me. It allowed me to forgive myself. To stop blaming myself for things that were out of my control. To stop thinking that if I had just been different, things would have turned out differently. For anyone out there who is stuck in a similar situation, who feels like they're constantly walking on eggshells, trying to make everything right, please hear me when I say, it's not your fault. You are not responsible for someone else's actions. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to make someone else happy. You are allowed to stand up for yourself. You are allowed to demand respect. That doesn't mean it's easy, though. Confronting the truth is painful, and it's not something that happens overnight. I've had to relive some of the worst moments in my life in order to truly understand what I went through. I've had to sit with the anger, the sadness, the confusion. But that's part of healing. It's part of reclaiming your power. And it's not just about leaving someone who hurts you. It's about leaving behind the mindset that keeps you stuck in that situation. It's about learning to trust yourself again. It's about realizing that you are worthy of a life filled with peace and love, not fear and pain. Ben doesn't get to have a hold on me anymore. He doesn't get to define who I am. And the more I face the truth, the more I realize that I'm stronger than I ever thought I was. So, to anyone reading this who feels like they're stuck, like they can't break free, take it from someone who's been there, you can do it. You will get through this. You deserve to live a life where you're not afraid of the next outburst, where you don't have to tiptoe around someone else's emotions. You deserve to be free. And don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. You are worthy. You are enough. You are deserving of peace. And it's out there waiting for you. There are moments in life that are so clear, so sharp, that you remember them forever. For me, one of those moments came when I was sitting in my therapist's office, listening to her tell me something I'd been avoiding for so long: you need to learn to let go of the story you're telling yourself. At first, I didn't understand what she meant. I thought I had already let go. I'd left Ben, I was living on my own, and I'd been working on healing. But then, she went on to explain that I wasn't just holding on to the pain from my marriage, I was still clinging to the narrative I had built around it. I'd convinced myself that I wasn't good enough, that I had to stay because I couldn't do better. That I was somehow responsible for Ben's rage, his manipulation. I kept telling myself that if I had just been more patient, more understanding, maybe he would have changed. It was in that moment that I realized I'd been living in the past, carrying around an old story that wasn't mine to hold anymore. I'd been telling myself that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worthy of something better. And that was the story I needed to let go of. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it was the truth. I had been so caught up in the what-ifs of the past that I hadn't given myself a chance to rewrite my own story. I was still letting Ben define who I was. And that was never going to work. I needed to learn how to reframe the way I saw myself. Instead of seeing myself as a victim, as someone who had been broken by her marriage, I needed to see myself as a survivor. I needed to realize that I had the power to change my own narrative, to take back control of my life. And that realization was life-changing. I think that's what healing really comes down to, the moment when you finally see yourself clearly. The moment when you stop seeing yourself through the lens of someone else's abuse and start seeing your worth for what it really is. It doesn't matter what Ben or anyone else said. What matters is what I believe about myself now. It's a slow process, but it's a necessary one. I've learned to stop second-guessing myself, to stop apologizing for things I didn't do. I've learned to stop seeking validation from people who don't deserve my time or attention. I've learned that the only validation I need is my own. That clarity also extended to my relationship with Ryan. I realized that, for so long, I had been hoping he would see the truth, that he would finally understand the depth of what I had been through. I kept waiting for him to apologize for dismissing my pain, for enabling Ben. But then I realized something else. I wasn't waiting for him to apologize, I was waiting for him to change, to give me the support I had always wanted from him. But Ryan wasn't going to change. He was who he was. And I couldn't keep waiting for someone to be something they weren't. I had to accept him for who he was, and more importantly, I had to accept myself for who I had become without needing his approval. So I stopped waiting. I stopped expecting things from Ryan that he was never going to give me. And that's when the weight finally lifted. I could move forward without being anchored by the hope of reconciliation. I don't think I realized how much I had been holding onto until I let it go. And once I did, things started to feel lighter. The future didn't seem so daunting anymore. I was free to rebuild, to start fresh, and to finally believe that I deserved better. To anyone reading this, struggling with the same feelings of self-doubt or guilt, take it from me, the moment you stop clinging to your old story is the moment you set yourself free. You're not defined by what you've been through, and you're not bound by the expectations of others. You are who you choose to be. And you get to rewrite your story any time you want. Don't let anyone else hold the pen. The story is yours to write. And you deserve a happy ending. After all the chaos, the confusion, and the heartbreak, I finally felt like I was starting to find myself again. The weight that had been holding me down for so long, Ben's abuse, Ryan's dismissal of my pain, the constant questioning of my worth, was lifting. I wasn't entirely free yet, but I was finally on the right path. Reclaiming my peace wasn't something that happened overnight. I had to learn to set boundaries, real ones, not just with the people who hurt me, but with myself. I had to tell myself that it was okay to put my needs first, that it was okay to say no without feeling guilty about it. That was one of the hardest things I've ever had to learn, that self-care isn't selfish. It's necessary. It was strange, at first, to feel at peace. For so long, I had been on high alert, never knowing when the next argument or explosion would come. I was used to living in a state of anxiety, of always waiting for the other shoe to drop. But slowly, I began to notice the small moments of calm, the quiet mornings with a cup of coffee, the days when I didn't have to worry about Ben barging in or causing trouble. I realized that these moments weren't temporary, they were the new normal. I also started doing things for myself, things I had never allowed myself to enjoy before. I took up yoga, started cooking again, and even went out with friends more. Jess, who had been my rock throughout all of this, pushed me to explore my passions, reminding me that I was more than just a wife, more than just a victim. I was a woman with dreams, with desires, with the ability to create a life I loved. And through all of this, I began to rediscover my self-worth. I stopped looking for validation from people who didn't deserve it. I stopped trying to prove myself to Ben, to Ryan, or anyone else who had ever doubted me. I realized that I didn't need their approval to feel good about who I was. I was enough, just as I was. I also started confronting the pain from my past. Instead of burying it, I let myself feel it, process it, and eventually let it go. I talked through everything with my therapist, wrote about it in my journal, and even allowed myself to cry when I needed to. It was cathartic in a way I didn't expect. The more I let go of the past, the more I felt like I was finally becoming the person I was always meant to be. But even with all the progress, I still had moments when I felt overwhelmed by the sheer amount of emotional baggage I was carrying. There were days when the anger would surge back up, when I would catch myself thinking about the things Ben had done to me and wonder how I could have been so blind for so long. There were nights when I would lie awake, wondering if I was ever truly going to be okay. It was in those moments that I reminded myself how far I had come. I wasn't the same person who had cried in a corner, too scared to leave. I wasn't the woman who had put up with years of emotional and physical abuse out of fear. I was someone who had fought for her own survival, someone who had learned to prioritize her peace above everything else. And that's the thing that has kept me going, peace. I've learned that peace doesn't come from external sources, it comes from within. It's not something you find by waiting for other people to change or for the world to be kinder to you. Peace is something you build for yourself, brick by brick. It's about creating an environment where you feel safe, where you can heal, and where you can grow. For anyone out there who is still struggling, who feels trapped in a toxic relationship, or who feels like they're stuck in a cycle of abuse, please, listen to me. You are not alone. There is a way out, and you deserve to be free. It's not easy, and it's not quick, but it is possible. You can find peace again. You can rebuild your life. And most importantly, you can rediscover your worth. You are not defined by your past. You are not defined by the people who hurt you. You are defined by how you rise from the ashes. So rise. And build a life filled with the peace, love, and happiness you deserve. I used to think that once I left Ben, everything would magically fall into place. I imagined that all my pain would disappear and that I'd somehow wake up one day, feeling whole again. But the truth is, rebuilding a life after trauma isn't like flipping a switch. It's messy. It's difficult. But it's also beautiful in its own way. The first few months after leaving were filled with so much uncertainty. I wasn't sure who I was anymore, let alone where I was going. I'd spent years shaping my life around someone else's needs, someone else's moods. I didn't know how to be independent. I didn't know how to trust my own decisions. But slowly, I started figuring it out. I started focusing on my own goals, my own dreams, for the first time in a long while. I enrolled in a graphic design course that I had always wanted to take but had put off for years. I started making new friendships, real ones this time, people who respected my boundaries and genuinely cared for me. And most importantly, I started falling in love with myself again. I think the hardest part was learning to trust other people. After Ben, after Ryan, I wasn't sure who I could rely on. I was wary of letting anyone close. But I knew that in order to heal fully, I had to open up again. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't instant. There were moments when I felt like I was too broken to be loved. There were moments when I wondered if I'd ever feel safe with someone again. But I began to trust slowly, in small steps. Jess was a huge part of that. She was always there for me, always reminding me that I didn't have to face this journey alone. She helped me see that it was okay to lean on others, that real love wasn't about control or manipulation, it was about support, understanding, and mutual respect. And then there was Alex. We met through a mutual friend, and at first, I wasn't sure what to make of him. He was kind, patient, and didn't push me to be anything I wasn't ready to be. He respected my space, and he listened to me when I spoke. Over time, I realized that he didn't want to fix me or save me, he just wanted to walk beside me, as equals. The relationship with Alex wasn't about healing from the past, it was about creating something new. It was about trusting again, not just him, but also myself. I learned that it's possible to be vulnerable without being weak. I learned that I could love again, but this time, I wouldn't lose myself in the process. As the months went by, I began to see how far I had come. I was no longer defined by the woman who had been beaten down by her husband. I was the woman who had survived, who had rebuilt herself from scratch. I was the woman who had learned how to love herself first, before anyone else. That doesn't mean everything was perfect, though. There were still tough days. There were still moments when I missed the old version of myself, the version who had been naive enough to believe in fairy tales, to believe that love could never hurt. But I knew better now. I knew that love was about respect, communication, and shared growth. And so, I kept moving forward. I kept growing. I kept creating a future where I didn't have to fear being hurt again. I knew that my past didn't have to dictate my future. It was hard, and it took time, but I was finally starting to believe that I deserved a life filled with happiness and peace. I don't think I'll ever forget the pain of what I went through, but I don't need to either. The past is part of me, but it doesn't control me anymore. It's a chapter, not the whole story. And now, I'm the one holding the pen. I'm the one choosing what happens next. For anyone who's reading this, feeling lost, or thinking that they'll never make it out, I promise you, you can. It won't happen all at once, and it won't always be easy. But you are stronger than you think. You are capable of more than you realize. And most importantly, you are worthy of a life where you feel safe, loved, and at peace. Keep going. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. It's been a while now since I left Ben. There are days when I still have to remind myself how far I've come, because sometimes the past can creep in unexpectedly. But I've learned how to manage those moments, how to remind myself that I'm not that person anymore. I'm not the woman who let her worth be defined by someone else's violence, someone else's anger. When I first left, I couldn't have imagined this version of myself. I couldn't have seen a future where I wasn't still hurting, still picking up the pieces of my life. But here I am, stronger than I've ever been, and it feels like I'm finally stepping into the life I was always meant to live. I've learned a lot through all of this. The biggest lesson, probably, is that healing isn't linear. It's not a neat, tidy process with clear steps. Some days are better than others. Some days, the weight of everything hits me all over again, and I wonder if I'll ever truly feel free of it. But then, there are days when I feel completely at peace, days when I realize that I've built something beautiful from the brokenness, something that I'm proud of. I'm also learning to forgive myself. That's the part one didn't expect to be so hard. I used to beat myself up over every decision I made during my marriage, thinking that I should have known better, that I should have left sooner. But the truth is, I was doing the best I could with what I knew at the time. I didn't have the strength or the knowledge I have now. And it's okay to forgive myself for that. I did the best I could, and I'm proud of how far I've come. There's still a lot of work to be done, though. I've learned to set healthier boundaries with people in my life, boundaries that protect my peace, that prioritize my mental and emotional well-being. I've learned that not everyone deserves a place in my life, and that's okay. I don't have to explain myself to anyone. I get to choose who I let in, who I trust, and who I walk away from. Alex and I are doing well. I'm not rushing into anything, and neither is he. Our relationship is based on trust, mutual respect, and open communication, things I never had with Ben. It's a relationship that's built on a foundation of healing, and I'm not looking for anyone to complete me. I'm complete on my own. But with Alex, I've found someone who adds to my life, who supports me in my journey without trying to change me. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally living life on my terms. I'm not afraid of my future anymore. In fact, I'm excited about it. If there's one piece of advice I'd give anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, it's this: don't let anyone define your worth. Not your abuser, not your family, not anyone who tries to convince you that you're not enough. You are more than enough, just as you are. You are worthy of love, respect, and happiness. And no matter how long it takes, you can rebuild your life and find peace again. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel lost at times. But don't give up on yourself. Keep pushing, keep growing, and when you feel ready, embrace the life that's waiting for you. You deserve it. You really do.